In the next few minutes, we're going to do an overview of Sage 300 ERP. And this is the core product that is generally included in one of two bundled products for on-premise deployment. The first one is the financial accounting bundle, which we'll look at. It includes general ledger, accounts payable, accounts receivable. Payroll can be added to that bundle. The second bundle is the distribution bundle, which includes all the modules we'll take a look at. So here's kind of the plan. We'll take a look at the options, the two main options for Sage 300, the web client versus the Windows client. All implementations will have some Windows clients because there is some functionality that's not available yet on the web client, although it's being released. Pretty significant chunks are being released as we go forward. The web client at this point is really designed for those who might need it for mobile sales or something of that nature. The second thing we'll take a look at in the Windows client is the menu system versus the process flow view of the system. The menu system is pretty traditional folders and icons kind of system. The process flows more of a flowchart looking system. And then as we look at individual screens, we will take a look at individual screens when we review the modules. We'll take a look at how we can tailor those, how we can do some things with security with individual screens. We will review all the modules, although the general accounting modules, I'm not going to do a deep dive into things like a chart of accounts. I will just show you some of the specific features of the general ledger that I think can be useful in reviewing the system and comparing it to others. We'll take a look at a customer record. We'll then take a look at kind of a deep dive in order entry and what we can do in order entry. And then after that, when we'll have gotten through the core system, we'll take a look, or we'll talk a bit about optional modules and third-party add-ons that are available from report writers to systems that support different kinds of functionality that are not in the core modules. And finally, we'll have a little break in the presentation, and we'll come back for those that are interested in the financial reporting side and take a look at Financial Statement Designer. If you're not interested in sort of a deep dive in the Financial Statement Designer, it may be a good time to exit the presentation when we hit the Financial Statement Designer, and I'll let you know when we get there. Here's my contact information. If you have any questions or need to contact me for some reason, you can reach me at this email address or either of these two telephone numbers. And with that, we'll take a look at the Sage 300 product. This is our Windows server where we'll be taking a look at Sage 300. The version that we are looking at is the premium version. We can talk a little bit more about that. Typically, buying per user, you will get the premium version, which has the minimum number of limitations in terms of number of years of history and things like that. 99 years of history, so on and so forth. People ask about multi-company, and you can see that we do have multi-company capability here. The password protection is turned off. We can do password protection either with an account in the software that's not connected to the Windows user account, or we can connect it to the Windows user account so you have single sign-on and use your Windows user account to log into the software. So this is a typical screen with all the modules enabled. When we set this up, we will select what modules to enable. So if, for example, you were only going to use accounts payable and general ledger, you could only enable those two and you would only see accounts payable and general ledger over here to the left-hand side. So let's first quickly review the modules that are available in Sage 300. We have, of course, the general accounting modules, general ledger, accounts payable, accounts receivable, payroll. Both U.S. payroll and Canadian payroll are available. We have U.S. payroll here. Common services is where we access things that apply to multiple areas of the program, like the bank services, scheduling, currency, tax setup, sales tax setup, things like that. Administrative services are the setup areas for an administrator. Of course, these are all protected by password by user security group, so we can have users that don't have access to this. Administrative services contains those things that we need to administer the program, like dumping and loading data. Then we have the operational areas of the product, things like inventory control, order entry, project and job costing, and purchase orders. These are all fully integrated. If you sell a product in order entry, it's removed from inventory. If you place a product on a job in project and job costing, that product is removed from inventory. Likewise, if you invoice a job through order entry, that invoice is reflected as sales on the job. So these are all integrated. The way that we're looking at this so far is through what I call a folder and icon menu system. So under General Ledger, I have the reporter. If I want to look at a General Ledger chart of accounts, I click on GL accounts. And then finally, when I get down to the chart of accounts and click on it, it launches the chart of accounts in the system. The other way to access the items in the Windows client is with the visual process flows. So for example, if I look at General Ledger transactions process flow, then I have more of a flowchart view of how we would move through the system. Batches, set up a batch of journal entries, then I post the batch, then I can print reports, transactions lists, trial balances, things like that. And then I have inquiries where I can look up different things. So this is my process flow once I have the system basic master data set up, like the chart of accounts. Then I can come down and operate on the process flows. This is designed to be much more understandable and much more flowchart oriented so that a new user of the system doesn't have to find journal entries or post batches within the folder system. You can also customize these process flows. So the AP process flow initially contained everything but customer records. So this was a typical AP process flow. Now I wanted to customize this to add customer records because sometimes I do look at the customer while I'm in the AP transactions flow. And so if I click down here, you'll see this will launch the customer screen where I can begin to access my customers. We could also create completely different process flows and attach them to individual users. So if we had a user, for example, that was responsible for purchasing inventory, who needed some process from the purchase orders, some process from inventory control, and perhaps even some from accounts receivable and order entry, we could put all of that on one process flow. And you can see some of that has been done on the purchase order transactions standard process flow. So let's go back and take a look at General Ledger accounts. One of the things you're seeing here is that I can open multiple screens at the same time within Sage 300. So if I'm working on the chart of accounts and a vendor calls to ask about a transaction, I can open up the AP vendors. I can look at vendor activity and notice that now I have two options down here that I can switch back and forth between. I can pull up my vendor activity, look at the aging, look at the transactions, and even if I want to look at the document, I can drill down into that particular document in order to be able to see exactly what vendor invoice that was and exactly what happened in that vendor. I can zoom down to see specific vendor address information, remit to a location address, and such. I can also look at details here that will show me what the details of that document were. And all of that while I've got my chart of accounts open so that I can switch back and forth between the two without having to open and close individual screens. So let's take a look quickly at an account within the chart of accounts. Let's take a look at an actual account that has a balance that will have some transactions in it, the bank account operating. Notice that I've got the standard information that I would want about an account. And in these particular things, which are standard accounting, I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time on talking about general ledger charts of accounts and vendors and customers. If you need more detail on that, then be sure and use the contact information, drop me an email. So I do want to look at some of these options here where I can set this up as a control account, and we might take a look at the accounts receivable account to see how that works with the accounts payable. And I tell it what subledgers are used. A subledger you can see would be like a source ledger and a source type. And then what happens is the postings to this account will be automatically restricted to those subledgers. So I can't accidentally go in and make an entry into the account. One of the things that used to happen when I was in public accounting is we do the audit or the year-end work, and the customer would call and say, hey, my accounts payable is out of balance. Was out of balance because one of the adjusting entries had been made to the account, should have been made to the detail as well as the control account. We can also turn on automatic allocation. We can tell the system, in effect, if a balance accumulates in this account, I want to spread it across operating divisions or departments. So this allows me then to say, I want to put this balance in a list of other accounts, use the reference, the description, and what percent I actually want to allocate. So I can allocate to different sets of accounts. I can also set up roll-up accounts, which allow me to select member accounts and will in effect create a tree structure in which sub-accounts roll up their balances into roll-up accounts. And then I have the ability to post to the account in detail or consolidate, or to stop posting to the account. For example, if I have an account I'm going to delete once the history is used in a couple of years. And then I can also maintain quantities. So for example, in a hotel, we might want to maintain room nights available to use with our financial accounting statement, so we can do revenue per room night available, something like that. This also allows me, the posting also allows me to have entries to this account consolidated. So if I choose detail and I post from accounts receivable, I'll get one entry for every invoice that I post in accounts receivable. If I do consolidated, I will get all of those debits consolidated together into one debit in accounts receivable. If we take a look at an accounts receivable trade account, notice it's set up as a control account, and I've allowed posting from the AR subledger and from the general ledger. We also have the ability to view transactions, to compare activity in different fiscal periods, to look at budgets by fiscal period, and to look at history of the account. And as I said, we won't cover those in detail because most people familiar with general ledgers will be familiar with that kind of functionality. The standard functionality is available to create accounts, do account, change account permissions, and only let certain users see certain segments, certain accounts. So for example, a clerk cannot see Division 300 accounts. We do have allocations. When we set the allocations up, we go in and create an allocation batch that generates the entry to move the balance in an allocation account to the other accounts that were specified in the allocation. We can consolidate posted transactions to reduce the size of the database. We do have to create new years at the end of the year. Period end maintenance is just the ability to remove inactive accounts and get rid of history. And we have recurring batches that we can set up. So if we have standard depreciation entries or something like that, we can set those up in the system. Then we have the standard list of reports that you would expect: chart of accounts listing, trial balances, transactions, source journals, and so on. One of the things that's a little bit unique in here that I'll show you in General Ledger Setup is we can actually set up the account structure. So we tell it that we have a structure code ACC that contains only the account number. And I'll show you back on the chart of accounts how that works. Then we can have account and division, and we can have a regional structure. Now, what that looks like on the chart of accounts, if I go back over here to the chart of accounts, is you see I have accounts that have only an account number. If I go down, so the balance sheet is not divisionalized. If I go down, then I have accounts that have one account structure and two account structures. So this is regional and then divisional in this particular setup. We can have up to 5 segments. The accounts can be quite long. If you want to make them long, seen a few customers that did that over the years. We can set up our own segment codes. We can set up groupings. These are used in financial statements where we tell the system, give it a code and tell the system, these are our financial statement groupings. These would be like headings that we would show detailed accounts under. And then on the financial statements, we can pull accumulated depreciation, all of the accounts that are in account group 6, so on and so forth. And these, of course, you can specify, you can change your sort codes and things as you go forward. Here are your recurring entries. Optional fields is a pretty unique concept. In order to really show you what um, optional fields does, let's go to common services quickly, because here's where I would actually set up the optional fields. So they go throughout the accounting product. In all of the modules, we'll see an optional field set up. So here I've got account number, account class. Notice on the account class, I have a text box, but I have values that are allowed for that. So this would be like a selection list. We have the contract types, have dates, just text. Let's create a new optional field. Call it test me. We can have all these different types of fields. Let's do something like a yes, no, whether this is a good customer. All right, so now we have a new optional field. And this is the list of what's been set up just in sample data. Give you an idea of the kind of data you can store, UPS zones, things like that. So now that we have them set up in common services, again, common services are things that are used by all the different modules. Go back over here to the General Ledger accounts and setup. And in optional fields, we then tell the system which optional fields are available for use in which types of transactions or objects or accounts. And so I'll just press insert and we'll add our test me optional field. And we'll say, no, yes, we want to set a value, though there's the default value is no. Let's make the default value yes, whether this is required or not, and whether we want to automatically insert it on an account and on a transaction detail. All right, and now on transactions, do we want to be able to use different fields on or different optional fields? And we'll do test me. In this case, we won't set the value. We will require that a value is filled in. So what will happen here on the transaction is a good customer will be required on a journal entry, but it will not be pre-filled. And so I'm not going to save that. That's the general overview of General Ledger transactions. Multiple people can enter in different batches at the same time. In General Ledger, you can process multiple companies at the same time. And the financial reporter we will take a look at later on at the end. So briefly, accounts payable. You have vendor records as you would expect in accounts payable, and you have the same kind of information that you would take a look at that. Save your typical vendor name, address, contact information, how this is processed, the best way to send communications to the customer, how you calculate use tax, where that's done, how you want to handle different duplication checking, the kinds of things that you would see in many uh, NAP invoice systems. I won't drill down into all of these. Same drill down kind of capabilities here where you can see details, optional fields capabilities. You can see detailed activity and statistics. And you have the ability to use the finder to find different vendors as you need them. One of the things I'll mention about the system here is we do have some security capability here. And let's create something called no details. This is actually screen-based security. So I have the ability to actually remove things from certain security details. So if I don't want users that have this particular working profile to be able to see certain items, I just clear those items that I don't want them to see. Um, and once I do that, save that, and then say OK. When I create a user, I can assign them to that working profile, and then those items on the screen will disappear. That's available in almost all the screens and is actually screen-based or field-based security because I can control the access to individual fields on the screen. We also have module-based security, which is back over here in administrative services. And these are security groups that we set up by individual module. And so in accounts payable, we have a full access that lets the user that has that group access everything. And we might create another one called clerk. And in that security group, we might only let them have access to vendor maintenance, batch entry, payment batch entry, so on and so forth, so that a clerk could not post certain items and couldn't see other items in the system. Okay, so in accounts payable, you have the same standard functionality that you would normally expect, the ability to enter invoices, the ability to enter payments, and to create batches of checks, to pay checks either by ACH, which is an option that can be turned on in the system, or to pay them by creating an actual manual check, or to create them by creating a system check and printing it on the printer. We have the standard reports that you would expect in vendors, standard reports related to transactions. Accounts payable is really, to me, the flip side of accounts receivable. And if you see what's on the customer screen, very similar to what's on the vendor screen, including how I want to communicate with the customer, what I do about credit limits and overdue invoices, and the ability to have optional fields and view activity and to do all kinds of different inquiry. In this screen, I have also access to a detailed inquiry screen where I can actually look at very detailed reports of orders, invoices, contract pricing if the customer has it. I can see pretty much everything about the customer from this one inquiry screen. One of the things in accounts receivable that you may or may not be familiar with is national accounts. And you typically will see this with a large retailer, let's say a hardware retailer like Lowe's or Home Depot, where you'll have many, many different stores that you'll ship to. You'll actually invoice the store, but your payment will come from a central national location. So that when you go in to apply the payment, you'll have all the invoices from different stores. But if you're having trouble with an invoice in terms of collection or overdue, you need to go to the individual store and know which store it's at because that invoice is controlled by the local store management. So a national account actually lets you group customers together so that for payment application, for invoicing, for credit limits, for reporting, you can treat them as a single customer, but you can also treat them as individual customers as you need to. Periodic processing in all the modules is where you do things that you're going to need to do on a recurring basis. You have the option here to have the system automatically create batches in GL every time you post a batch in AR, or you can delay those until the end of a period, the end of a day. Most customers these days go ahead and post in live, real time, post it through everywhere you need it. We can create batches for interest if you charge interest on overdues. We can do things with retainage if you are doing work for customers that actually retain part of the invoice, like would be common in construction. You can do write-offs. This is an interesting feature where we can tell the system uh, certain customer invoices from a certain amount to another amount we want to write off. This can be helpful in situations like credit cards where you charge a customer $500. The credit card collection that you get is actually $480, and so you have $20 left out there. Or the customer invoice was for an even dollar, you got paid 99 cents, so you've got a penny one way or another. This allows you to go through the system and say, okay, everything less than 10 cents, just write it off without having to do it one at a time. And then, of course, you've got the ability to year end and clear different histories and things like that. Setup, a lot of different options here. Uh, Interesting ones I'll go to. Billing cycles allow you to send out receivable statements at different times of the month. Distribution codes, if you commonly distribute an invoice from the gas company to 2 or 3 key accounts, you can set those up and use a single code to do the distribution so you don't have to key in 3 different accounts. Dunning messages for overdues and invoice profiles, interest profiles, and payment codes, things like that are pretty common. And we've also got optional fields here. Now, one nice thing, the reason it's in common services, if I set up an optional field on an AR transaction in accounts receivable, when I post the entries related to that transaction, the optional fields will flow through to the general ledger, and then they're available for reporting in the financial reporter. So if I want to split out all my large customer transactions from my small customer transactions, or all my European customers from my Asian customers, from my US, from my Canadian customers, I can set those optional fields up in accounts receivable and flow them through to the general ledger. Also true of order entry, also true of inventory control, and the other modules as well. Payroll is a fairly standard payroll system, although it does handle many of the things that I've had trouble handling in other systems in the 30 years or so I've been doing this. So for example, in the US, we have a garnishment that is so many percent, let's say 30% of what's left after you deduct federal taxes, uniforms, tools, so on and so forth. We have the ability to set that up by prioritizing the different deductions so that we can say these 4 deductions come before the calculation of this particular garnishment, and this garnishment uses the net that's left after these other uh, deductions and earnings have been applied. So very typical payroll system. You have also the ability here to use a third-party company to do all your reporting, so you don't have to fill out your quarterly tax return forms. That's on an additional optional fee basis with a company that will take all that information and complete the reports for you. And you have standard payroll time cards, payroll employees. Another thing that we mention in the setup here is you do not have to create a time card for every employee for every payroll. The time card actually overrides what's set up in the employee record. So if I set up an employee in the system to be paid for 80 hours every other week, and I'm going to pay this salary for 80 hours or an hourly rate times the 80 hours. If I'm going to pay what's set up here, I don't have to put in a time card for that employee. The only time I have to put a time card in for this employee is if I'm going to pay them something different from what's on this screen. So I can override the healthcare premiums. I might not take out that $100 for this particular week. That I could do with a time card. I could pay 60 hours, or I could pay 80 hours and 20 hours of vacation, or 50 hours and 30 hours of vacation. So the employee, we set all the deductions and earnings up, and then we apply overrides with the time card. Also in the time card, we have the ability to save a time card from period to period. So if I have an employee, let's say, that hits the Social Security maximum in the US, so we're going to deduct that for part of the year. We used to have clients when I was in public accounting that wanted their check to remain even throughout the year. So we would do a calculation and we would withhold less federal tax. We'd manually override the federal tax withholding for the first 6 months of the year. And when they hit the Social Security maximum, meaning that they didn't have that 7.65% coming out. No, actually, it'll be 6%. They didn't have that 6% coming out. Then we would increase the federal withholding for the rest of the year so that their check amount would never change as the taxes change. Well, since that's an override, we're going to have to do it on a time card. But notice that we can check reuse time cards. So we set it up once at the beginning of the year, process until we get ready to change in the middle of the year, then make the change and process for the rest of the year. So just a couple of things that are a little different about the payroll system. Now let's take a look at inventory control, and I won't hit this in tremendous detail, but I will say you have standard information about items that you would expect to have: the weight, the cost, notes, so on and so forth, different units of measure, taxes, optional fields, of course. Then we have the vendors that sell that item. We also have details on customers, and we can put in the customer item number, just like on the vendor. We can store the vendors of the products along with the vendor item number. We have item pricing in the system, which allows us to take an item and create different price lists with different pricing on it. So sometimes we have clients that have percentage relationships. So an A customer gets 30% off list, a B customer gets 25, and so on. But we also have clients that have a wholesale price and they have a whole set of discounts for that price. We have a retail price and they have discounts for that price. So Sage 300 allows you to do both. We can create a price list that has a base price for the item as well as sale prices if we want to do that. And then we can do contract pricing, which is an override for a specific customer, either for a specific item or for a specific category of items. So for Ronald Black gets a 5% discount on the lowest price on tilter chairs. And then we can manufacture items, we can set our reorder quantities. We do have bills of material available. We have kitted items. Distinction between a bill of material item and a kitted item is a kitted item is actually stored in inventory as the individual items. So for example, this is an office supplies kit. It's actually stored in inventory as these individual items, and it's only put together when we actually create an order for that. So part of the picking the order is going and pulling the individual items out of inventory and making the kit. We have the capability to do serial numbers and lot numbers, barcodes, and we have the ability to optimize some inventory optimization. Again, periodic processing, the ability to take a physical inventory to analyze sales and prices, the standard setup kinds of things that you would expect, along with multiple locations. Standard in the system as many locations as you got disk space for. And then setup reports, stock control reports, and actually the ability to do receipts and shipments and adjustments right inside the inventory system. Let's take a look quickly at order entry, and we'll actually enter an order and illustrate the use of the system. So if I leave new in there, the system will generate a new order number. I want to do a search on customer name, and I want to find Ronald Black. Whoop. I'll select him. The system loads all the information it knows about Ronald, his tax information, his optional field settings, who the salespeople on the account are. If I drill down here on the customer, I see the address information. If I drill down here on the ship to location, I see the standard ship to. If he says he wants to ship it somewhere else, I can also look at his information. I can select a carrier and I can put in his purchase order number. I can also, if I have created quotes and I want to create an order by sucking up quotes to put those into an order, I can do that here and just select the quotes if there are any out there and hit the order button at the bottom. When I add items, I can do items or miscellaneous charges. I have the same kind of search screen. I can look for chairs, and let's go ahead and pick this chair. The system tells me when I select an item that in location 1 I have 44, and in all locations I have 44. I can change the location here if I need to. I can put in shipment, expected ship dates and delivery dates, and he wanted 3 of those chairs. If there are alternative units of measure, I can pick those like a case or a box price. And we can go on over and see the other unit prices, weight, unit of measure. Notice here I have a lookup field. I can see the other prices if I want to see other prices. And I can actually give this customer another price. If I need a price approval, I can get that. And then I can actually do this all in one step. I could go ahead and ship some of these, or I can just post this as an order and print an order confirmation. I'm going to say no. If I had Ronald Black set up as a customer that got an email, I could email that document to the customer. Now, there are several ways for me to process that order. One way is I can go in and actually enter the shipment. Then I can pull one or more shipments to a single invoice. So for example, if I had 3 orders come in, I ship them all the same day. I want to invoice them all on one invoice. That's possible. If I do that, I can go into shipments, enter my customer, or search for my customer. I can zoom and look at information just like in the other system. Can check the credit. I can do an inquiry. If I do an inquiry and bring up that inquiry screen, let me show you, for example, that if I go to orders, we can see all the orders that are out there, the type of order, the date it was entered, and what the different things are that are associated with that order. I want to order this by order number, and let's get the latest one at the top. So this right here, if I double click it, is the order we just entered. So we have all kinds of inquiry capability here right from the order entry screen. If I'm going to actually ship from an order, I can go ahead and select, and it'll be the last order. In this case, I can go ahead and select that. I can ship all or part. I'm going to go ahead and ship 3. Notice the back order quantity is recalculated. I can take a payment here if I want to, or I can just say ship them all. When I post that, I can print a picking slip. Now I have a shipment that's been created, and then I can invoice that shipment. And again, I can do my lookups, select the shipment that hadn't been invoiced, and post. And we'll go ahead and print this to the screen. Standard invoice. Notice that I can also send to the print destination, or I can send to the customer request. So I could actually email this at this point. And this is the invoice for 3 of the posture chairs and the amount it's due. Discount date, there's no discount or discount amount. And so that's the entire order. That's what I call a 3-step order. We can also do it as a single step order. So customer number. This time we'll do a desk lamp. We'll order 10. We'll go ahead and ship 10. Quick note here before we post this. If I hit history, I can see the history of this customer's purchases, different items. So the customer calls and says, hey, I want one of those things, or I need a bulb for that lamp. I can see the history of purchases right here. I can also take a payment, credit card payment right here, and it will close out when it goes to accounts receivable. And then I press post, and it says, what do you want to print? And I'll say yes. In this case, I did a 2-step where I only created the shipment. And then we can go over here also. And here's that shipment for the lamps, and we'll post. On any screen that looks like this that has a list of items, I have the ability to rearrange these columns. So I'll just pull up the last order we created and then show you that I can drag the location, expected ship date. If I don't want the deliver by date, I can right click and do hide deliver by. Same for any of these other columns. So I can customize this screen, the order of the fields, to the way I use the system. And that's also true of any of the other data entry screens that have this columnar kind of arrangement. So that's a quick overview of an order. When I post that order, depending on my settings, I can have the invoices created, posted through to accounts receivable and the general ledger automatically, or I can post to accounts receivable and stop there, just depending on what I want to do. Purchase orders, then standard purchase order module, the capability to do minimum and maximum transactions. Inventory control has min-max set up where you can have it select items for reordering, create what I call a pro forma, or just a here's what the system thinks you ought to order, which you then can modify before you create the actual purchase orders. One thing I now want to show you is, go ahead and close out of the desktop version. I want to show you the web screen version, which runs in a browser. The only browser I happen to have loaded here is Internet Explorer, so it's going to launch in that. This also works in browsers like Chrome, Firefox. So here we are at the login for the web screens, and you notice I have the same 3 companies available. Still have security turned off, so I don't have to enter a password. And then I'm going to get the web screen homepage. So here's the web screen homepage. You can see it can have kind of a dashboard with different little widgets on it. If I mouse over the widgets, I get the actual value. The widgets may or may not have settings. So for example, income and expenses, I can change to profit and loss, although there's no reason to, but you can see it change. And I can add widgets. So here's one, payables aging. We'll add that one. One of the reasons I wanted to add payables aging is that payables aging does have some settings. So I can tell payables aging instead of a standard aging, perhaps I want 15, 30, and 45 aging, and we'll say save. And now I will get a different aging based on the values I just specified. The other thing, I have the modules up here across the top. Let's take a look at what these screens look like. And we'll actually take a look at the order entry screen. While we're waiting for that, we'll go ahead and bring up the customer. So you'll see in the web screens, I can also have multiple screens open at one time. In this case, if I want to switch back and forth between the screens, I click on the window over here and then I click the one that I'd actually like to see. So we'll go back to order entry here. So this is what the order entry web screen looks like. Again, I have search capability here with standard kinds of options. So I want to search by customer name, and I want to do a contains search. And then we'll find Ronald Black, select him, and select. And you can see the options are on a hamburger menu. So if I want to see the customer bill to address, that brings that screen up. And then if I wanted to do a pre-credit check, I can do that as well. So here's our customer information. If we keep scrolling down, we get to the screen. In the standard Windows interface, I can edit the columns, hide columns, add columns, rearrange columns, and I can also do that here. So if I don't want to see the kit BOM, I can just uncheck that. And if I want to put the price list in front of the description, I just click and drag and drop it where I want it. and then say apply, and the columns on the screen will rearrange. The same thing I could get by right-clicking and hiding a column in the Windows interface. Notice the price list is now here, or by dragging and dropping columns. Say add a line, and again we have item and miscellaneous charge as options. We have search screens here. And we can select from the search screen. And all the same basic functionality that we had before. As you can see, we also get quantities at the bottom, just like we did in the Windows screens. And here also, we have the capability, as we did in the Windows screens, to click on these optional pencils and see where those 58 items are actually on order, and even to look down into the detailed order. So if we have 58 on order, we don't have enough to meet this particular order, we can actually look and see, okay, this customer is more important than the other customers, so we're going to ship the available items to them. And at any time during this process that we want to go to the other window, we just click over here on Windows, select the window we want, and the screen changes to that window. We can work on this window, and then jump back to the other one right where we were. We get ready to close the windows, we just click close. One of the things that people occasionally ask is this live? In other words, I'm out in the field, I'm on a tablet, I enter an order using this. Is it live? The answer is yes. You see that immediately in the database. You're fully connected to the database. People say, can I use this along with the Windows screens? Yes, you typically would use it with at least some Windows screens, because there are some features in here that are not available in the web client as of yet. They're being released. The web screens are being released as rapidly as Sage can. There's been a major release of screens already in 2016, and we're expecting more toward the end of 2016 when the new version for 2017 comes out. So that's the basic overview of the Sage 300 product. So that's an overview of the core modules. Now you might ask, well, what if I need warehouse management? Or what if I need manufacturing? Or what if I need service management, like a service contract, heating and air conditioning company? The answer is Sage has done a great job of recruiting sort of best-in-class developers to develop products in the third-party or add-on marketplace for that. So there is a shipping product, there's a very good service management product, there's an excellent manufacturing product that integrates with Sage 300. Give us a call, because in some cases there are multiple products out there, and depending on your specific situation, you want to pick the right product for you. So again, take a look at the contact information, and if you need any information on any add-on products or other functionality you're looking for, there are options like report writers and such. We're not even covering the intelligence reporting in this video, which is a kind of an ad hoc report writer that's based on Microsoft Excel. So do give us a call if you have questions about any of that, and we'll be glad to assist you. And next I'm going to do kind of a deep dive into the financial reporter. To get to the financial reporter, you'll want to be in the General Ledger tab, Financial Reporter. If you already have financial statements designed, you can print them directly without going into the designer through this icon. But we're going to go in through the designer. When you click the designer, you'll get this window, and you need to click Start. The financial statement designer actually operates in Excel, so Excel will load. You'll also notice that there'll be an Add-ins tab, and here we'll have FR Financial Reporter. And we'll take a look at some of that as we look at financial statements. So let me quickly open a pre-designed financial statement. This is an income summary. One of the things I would suggest as you get into the statement designer is that you come to the Help menu and go to Documentation and open the language and then the Financial Reporter User Guide. And this user guide will take you through all of the codes and the different things that you can do with the Sage 300 Financial Reporter. So you can see you have an overview of the process and a tutorial and so on and so forth. So the Financial Reporter is an Excel-based product that works as an add-in. Here is the sample financial statement. And you'll notice that we have what looks to be two copies of the same thing. Now I'll show you, let's just go to the add-in and we'll go to FR View, which is the way we run the financial statement. This is going to show us the same dialog that we would see in Sage 300 if we printed a financial statement. And we'll just say OK and accept the defaults for period and for the account ranges. All right, so you can see what happens is this is actually the design of the financial statement up here. And then down below, we actually see the calculated financial statement created on the spreadsheet. This is in a named range on the Excel spreadsheet. And you'll notice that if you change or add columns, sometimes you'll have to work with the named ranges to make sure everything is in the right named range. Just to show you quickly where that is, if we go over here to Formulas and we click on the Name Manager, you'll see all of the named ranges. You don't want to change these unless you change something about the layout of your spreadsheet. But you'll notice the print area needs its own set of names, and the specification has to include all of the specification columns. So let's take a quick look at what's in a specification. If we look over here at the Financial Reporter User's Guide, and we go down to Chapter 3, where we have about financial statement specifications and about columns in report specifications, you'll see that each one of these columns is actually assigned to something, some meaning in the financial statements. And so if we look back over here, we can see that column A would normally have a range of accounts. This will match any account because over here we've limited to account group 15. And I don't know if you remember the account group setup, but if we go back over here to GL setup and we look at the account groups, then you'll see that account group 15 is actually revenue. And so we're working on a financial statement. So the first thing we're going to get is revenue. And then the second set of lines will get either 19 or 16. Again, we'll have to go back over here to the account groups to see 16 is opening inventory and 19 is cost of sales. So what we're doing here is we're just building a financial statement as we go forward. When we actually use the FR View function over here in add-ins under FR View, all of this will extract into individual accounts depending on what else we've told it. This column right here, for example, the T says add up everything in account group 15. And down here you'll see we have a single line that says revenue. Then in column D, if we just blank out the D column in the specification up here, and we redo FR view, pardon me, then you'll see we get a lot of different accounts. In this case, the description that we've used over here is repeated over and over again. There are other codes that we use to actually use the name of the account, but that'll give you an idea of how the financial statement formatter actually works and how the programming codes work. You'll also need to take a look in the manual to make sure that you understand how all these pieces fit together. Okay, so let's have a look at another financial statement. Oh, I want to show you one more thing here. You'll notice down here that we have a common size income statement, and let me rerun that with column D change deleted and show you what we get down there. If we look at this, this is a value because it's been converted to a value when it was calculated. But if we come up here and look at the formula, if we look at the values for the formulas, you'll see that these are just formulas like any other formula in Excel. And if you look at the calculation, this is actually cost of sales divided by revenue, which is then, as the financial statement is generated, it's filled in with the actual value of the calculation. So in the financial reporter, we can both take advantage of the formulas and the limitations, the account groups, the account ranges, account numbers, and we can take advantage of Excel functions. If we look at this column, this is where we tell the financial reporter what information or what financial information to pull. And in this case, it's a financial reporter amount column that is net year to date. So you can have as many columns as you want. Remember, if you expand the number of columns, you're going to need to change the formula over here in the name manager so that spec includes the columns. The key information that you need about these ranges starts, and about the content starts about page 27, about financial statement specifications. And the information about the ranges is actually on page 73, right here in the financial statement user guide. So be sure you take a look at that. Let's take a look at some other financial statements and some other things that we can do with the financial statement designer. This is one way to use the financial statement designer, by using columns, and using this method we can draw out a large number of accounts with very little code. You can see we can do a whole financial statement with a few lines of code. Let's open another financial statement. This is a financial ratio, and you can see in the design here we have a number of different financial ratios. And let's do the FR view function here. And you'll notice that we get the actual calculation of the ratios down below. If we look at these formulas here, you'll see that this first formula, profit margin, depends on values in F19 and F10. If you look at this carefully, you'll see that we have some rows hidden. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to unhide those rows. And if you look here, what we've done is we've just done a financial statement, pulled those values and hidden them. So that's another thing we can do with a financial statement. Let me close these two, and I will show you something else we can do. on a blank spreadsheet, we have another function here called FR paste. You'll see when we bring this up that this gives us access to the different functions that the macros enable in Excel. So if I were to pick FRAMTA that we saw earlier, here's a list of all the codes for balances that I can use to pull a balance. So current period, let's suppose I wanted to pull the net change last quarter. So here's net change last quarter. Then I can put in which fiscal designator I want, and you'll have to take a look at the actual code book to determine what all these are. But this will give you an idea of using the paste, and I can actually select individual account numbers. So if I wanted to build a spreadsheet that had something to do with the balances in different accounts, I can paste these in and then go to the next row and select the next account and paste it in and go to the next row. And I can actually build a spreadsheet pulling individual information. This can be a little bit more clear if we use this information, which will allow me to pull an account description. And you'll see I can actually pull individual account descriptions using a function in Excel. So any information that's available pretty much in the chart of accounts and the financial reporter can be selected and pasted over in the financial statement designer, and it will be updated live on the fly as you make changes in the general ledger, as you post transactions and then refresh or FR view your financial statement here. Let's take a look just briefly at these other options here. FR Clear actually will clear the report range. FR Options allows you to set a couple of options about beginning balances. And Drill Down, if you have Drill Down set up in your spreadsheet, will drill down to the actual transactions that make up the balances. There's also help that's available directly through here. One of the things I would encourage you to take a look at in the help, and you can actually search for this, is optional fields. Because you actually have the ability to pull optional fields for transactions and to report transactions based on optional fields. So be sure and take a look at that in the financial reporter. It gives you a tremendous amount of flexibility to use Financial Reporter and to draw data out of your general ledger. Here's my contact information. If you have any questions or need to contact me for some reason, you can reach me at this email address or either of these two telephone numbers.